Okay, so now what we're going to be talking is a very, very important concept that you need to understand, which is the flood protection. So, what is the concept of flood protection? Now, suppose you have an agent, right? This is an agent, and your agent is going to do whatever it needs to do, but at the end of the day, the agent needs to send the information that it collects over to the manager. Now, inside this agent, you have a couple things. One is the engine, right? The engine that operates, and then you have the modules. This engine is in charge of running one or more modules. One module can be a collector. Another module can be your FIM. Another module can be your CSA. So 3 different modules right here, and the engine is going to run those modules. When the agent gets the information from the modules, the agent is supposed to ship, right? Ship those events towards the manager. Now, I'll come back up in a moment, but suppose now you have agent 1, agent 2, and agent 3. You are getting informations from multiple modules. So multiple modules are sending information towards the agents. And the agent is supposed to send all these informations back to the manager. If we simply forward all the events towards the manager, now what we have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see here that we are possibly and probably causing an outage or causing a bottleneck on the manager because it's getting way too much information. So to prevent the manager from getting information that he can't process, the agent has a mechanism that is called flood protection mechanism. So how does it work? That now I'll go back up. That the modules have inside these agents we have the concept of a bucket. Okay? We call this a leaky bucket. This is a leaky bucket. This leaky bucket is going to have two important data, two important limits. One is going to be the amount of events, and the other one is the rate of shipping. The rate of shipping. So, by default, the amount of events that can be inside that leaky bucket is 5,000. And by default, the rate of shipping towards the manager is 500 events per second, EPSs. So regardless of how much events are coming from the modules, they go first towards the leaky bucket. And the leaky bucket says, okay, I'm getting a lot of events, but I am not going to send towards the manager events at more than the 500 EPS, 500 events per second. Okay? Now, there is another protection mechanism that is actually right here. So, right here. That each agent in each module, this one is not per agent, this one is per module. In each module, let's say we have one thing that is called limit. This one is, again, per module. So per module, we have the ability to control what is the limit of events that we can put inside the leaky bucket. Once the events are inside the leaky bucket, they're going to be limited by the 5,000 events. And once they are inside the leaky bucket, now they are being shipped towards the manager on a rate of 500 EPS. So far, so good. Now, inside this leaky bucket, right? Inside this leaky bucket, we have some alerts. The first one is going to be at 90%. This one is called warning alert. The second is going to be 100%. This one is full alert. There is 70%. That's called normal alert. And there is one that is called flood alert. And there is one variable that, let's call it timeout. Timeout. So if the capacity of the leaky bucket reaches 90%, a warning alert is fired. But that alert that is fired on the 90%, well, the bucket is not full, so you're not losing any event, you're not losing anything. It's just a warning that you are losing. You might soon start to lose events. Now, if the threshold keeps growing and the leaky bucket is full, with 100% full, two things happen. One is the full alert is going to fire to say, well, the leaky bucket is full. Three things happen actually. One is alert is fired saying the leaky bucket is full. The second thing that happens is anything additional to 5,000 is going to be dropped. So at the full alert, you are starting to lose data. The third thing that starts is this timeout countdown starts. By default, this timeout is set to 60 seconds. So you're reaching the full. As soon as you reach the full, alert is fired, you're losing data, and the timeout starts. Why is this timeout? So that means you have 60 seconds from the moment the full alert is fired. You have 60 seconds to bring the capacity of the leaky bucket back to 70%, which is normal. If you don't get to if 60 seconds lapses and your capacity doesn't go below 70%, a flood alert is fired. Right? A flood alert is fired. So let me bring this over for you to understand. So we have the leaky bucket. This is the leaky bucket. On the leaky bucket, you have an exit over here, which is your EPS. Again, 500 per second. Leaky bucket capacity is 5,000 events. You have your modules, right? Modules, module 1, module 2, module 3, and multiple modules. These modules, they will dump a whole bunch of events inside the leaky bucket. This leaky bucket is going to start to fill. So you have 70%, you have 90%, of course you have 100%. Your bucket is going to get a lot of data from the modules, so your data is growing. Your data is growing inside the bucket. You turn on additional module, your data is growing. So as of now, everything is normal. As soon as you hit your 90%, so first you hit the 90%, what happens? Warning, alert. But nothing happens, it's just a warning. You keep on turning on additional modules, now it increases. You hit the 100%. Second step, you hit 100%. Now the full alert is fired. When the full alert is fired, timeout, countdown of 60 seconds starts. In this mode, you are dropping excessive event. Anything that is coming now is being dropped. Third, the 60 second is keep on going down. So you have now two options. If your capacity of the leaky bucket is reduced below 70% within the 60 seconds, normal, you get back your normal alert is fired. But even if your traffic reduces, but it doesn't, it reduces to it goes back to 71% within 60 seconds. So it didn't make it below 70. It made it to 71 in 60 seconds. Now your flood alert kicks in. Right? So you have these warning mechanism so you can know that you are in a more difficult position. Okay? Now, these settings. So we talk about a few settings, and these settings can all be configured. Example, when we talk about the bucket, leaky bucket, we can configure the capacity. And we can configure the EPS. But we can also configure the threshold for warning, for full, timeout, and flood. Okay, but flood alert is really dependent on the timeout. So where do we do it? What are the few things that we do? We can configure the leaky bucket in terms of capacity, in terms of EPS. We can configure the threshold in terms of warning, full, timeout, and the flood. And we can configure also the modules in their limits into what are they going to be, what they should be able to put inside the leaky bucket. These are agent stuff, right? These are agent stuff. So configuration. You have configuration on the agent side, and you can configure these settings from the manager side. Okay? Two ways for you to configure this stuff. Now, if you decide that you want to, yes, I want to go and configure this stuff, where do you do it? Let's say agent, you have your Windows, you have your Linux, and you have your Mac. In Windows, I'll talk about Windows and Linux. In Linux, everything from the agents is going to be where? In var OSEC, right? var OSEC, etc, and osec.conf. So if we go on here and we do a vim, we are going to go, we have a section of this file that is called client buffer. Again, you're going to see a closing for the client buffer. Inside this client buffer, you're going to have an option, client buffer. You're going to have an option with disabled, which can be yes or no. This disabled meaning we are going to disable all these type of controls, and simply everything that comes in goes out. So disable, yes or no. Hopefully you're not disabling this feature. By default is on the yes side. Then you're going to have a statement for the number of events, which you're going to see that is set to 5,000. And then you're going to see another settings for the EPS, which is set to 500. So, first thing that the engineers do is to try to manage that setting. If you're turning on a bunch of modules, then you don't want to lose information. Another file that is very important is for your threshold. You're going to find it in var OSEC etc, and it's going to be internal options.conf. And if you go inside internal options.conf, you will be able to change the settings for the alerting and everything else. This file is locally, you're doing this locally on every single agent. But on the Windows, you go into C, Program, Files, right, slash, OSEC, agent, backslash, and you will find your osec.conf, and likewise you're going to find your internal options.conf. Okay, these are if we are doing the configuration directly on the agent. And as I said, you can also do this configuration from the manager, and from the manager we configure the configuration file, and that file is pushed towards all the clients, and it does overwrite the files you're doing locally. So really, we're going to talk about that into, as we do the demo. But when you want, if you have a configuration file that you're pushing from the manager, and at the same time you want to overwrite that specific agents to override what is coming from the manager, we can also do that. But the files are a little bit different. And for that, we'll have to talk about some order of operations in terms of how the informations are being processed at the agent level. Alrighty. So, in a nutshell, if I put everything together, this is your agent. This agent has two files. One is in var OSEC etc and osec.conf. We're going to have a var OSEC etc internal options.conf. Likewise, we may have the C program files x86 OSEC agent /osec.conf and the internal options.conf. Once we go inside that file, one section for the osec.conf, we're going to have the client buffer section. Inside the client buffer, we're going to have the disable option, which by default is on yes. We can set it to no if we want to. We're going to have the options for the number of events, which is set to 5,000, and the EPS, which is set to 500. And if we go into the internal options file, we are going to have the warning, where it's set to 90%. We're going to have the full 100%, normal set to 70%, and we're going to have the threshold timeout set to 60 seconds. And these properties and these values, when we change them, what are we changing is the leaky bucket capacity, the warning at 70%, normal at 70, 900%, 90%, 100%. The EPS is at the bottom, and here is what goes into the manager. We can also go inside each modules and configure the limits on a per module basis. Okay? So these are, we are configuring before the data goes into the manager. When it gets into the manager, we have, the manager, a few things about the manager we want to change. The alerting warning that by default, it only captures events that are level 3 or more that are being saved. We want to enable a few things, but we'll talk about those as we progress. For now, that's a little bit overview of what happens at the agent level. Thank you, and I'll see you in about 2 minutes.